You know, when I was a kid and got a hold of a nickel, I thought I was rich. I didn't turn up my nose at pennies either. Today, some folks won't even bend to pick them up. Well, here's a bowl of steaming Quaker oatmeal. And I can't think of a healthier way to start the day.
Diabetes, 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 diabetes.
Thank you, Wilford. Diabetes, diabetes, diabetes.
Diabetes, 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 diabetes.
Diabetes, 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 diabetes.
Diabetes.
Back in the old days, diabetes was chronic and progressive. It could only be managed. Then it was discovered you could put it into remission, but you could only be in remission. You couldn't be cured. But now the...
Okay, so last time we spoke, we were talking about you had reverse diabetes on the carnivore diet, but you were still drinking alcohol, and it took you about 2 years to transition onto the carnivore diet. But now you've gone completely raw. So
that's not quite correct, because I haven't gone completely raw. I'm not allowed to eat raw at home because it grosses Lainey out. So she does like cooking meat at the weekend. So my way of eating now is Monday to Friday at work. I take 2 steaks in with me. I take a 10-ounce lamb steak and an 8-ounce ribeye or sirloin, and I eat the 10-ounce lamb steak raw with pink Himalayan salt at about 8 o'clock in the morning. So that's effectively my breakfast. And then at midday, I will have the 8-ounce sirloin or rub, again raw. And then in the evenings, if I'm still hungry, then Lady cooks off some bacon for me, so I can just raid the fridge for cold bacon. So that's the way I eat now. That's pretty much my Monday to Friday work-a-day way of eating. It's produced noticeably good results. At the weekend, Lainey likes to cook premium meat. For example, obviously it's Christmas now, so we've got the remains of the turkey in the fridge, and we've got the remains of the beef that we had for lunch as well. So I'll be eating that pretty much for the next few days before I go back to work, and when I return to my Monday to Friday protocol of mostly raw. So yeah, it's been an interesting experiment. It all started back in June when Carl of the Primal Lifestyle announced that he was going to go raw because he'd made a video. The chap called Jacob McAteer, who is a 100% raw carnivore and who looks a picture of health. So I originally said, no, I'm not going to bother Carl. I don't need to. But when he started, I decided that I would come out in sympathy with him. So I bought myself 2 steaks one week and ate them raw. Got on really well with it. So I upped it to 4, then 8, and then now I'm on 10 raw steaks a week. And the health benefits I've seen have been tangible. My gut health has improved to the point now where it's pretty much perfect, I'd say. Everything is working incredibly well. And also the big one for me, and I've spoken to you about this before, is about 3 months after going raw, my knees came back, and I'm actually walking the 1 3/4 miles to work every day now. I'm walking the 1 3/4 miles back, so I'm walking 3.5 miles a day, which, when you consider that back in 2022 I could barely put one foot in front of the other, that's an incredible transformation. It really is. It's just one of the major recent health benefits. Whether I can put that down to raw carnivore or not, or just the fact that I'm carnivore, I don't know. But it's more than the coincidence, I think, that I've suddenly got the energy and the flexibility in my knees to walk again. And as you know, one of the most important things is movement, and I've got the movement now. I still have a hernia, so I don't think I'll be powerlifting or lifting in the gym ever again, and I don't think I'll be running ever again. But to be able to walk steadily for 3.5 miles a day is a huge benefit. It really is. Yeah,
that's right. Well, just people don't, people underestimate or they take for granted, walking. But when it's taken away from you, you really notice it, and you're not so mobile, and it can be incredibly frustrating. So that's fantastic. That's a great result.
Yeah, the thing is, obviously, as you know, I was a sportsman in my youth, and I used to be a cross-country runner and a rugby player and everything like that. So to lose the ability to actually walk was a really, it's a hideous thing in my life. And I'd come to accept the fact that I probably never would walk again. But now, 2.5 years on from transitioning to carnivore, here I am walking. I'm doing at least 16, 17 miles a week, because I do walk at the weekend as well. So it's a fabulous transformation. It really is.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, give it time too. You might find that you might, eventually you might do more as well. But I mean, how long have you been eating raw now? I
think myself and Carl started in June. So that's probably 6 months now. Yeah, probably 6 months. Yeah. So yeah, I'm hoping against hope that basically I am still transitioning, and my body is still rebuilding the mitochondria, because obviously I spent 57 years poisoning my mitochondria with seed oils and sugar. So obviously, and I think the half-life of seed oils in the body is quite a long time, and it's nowhere near, I haven't reached it yet.
That depends on how much body fat you carry as well. So because seed oils are fat soluble, they're fat storable as well. So the more fat you carry, then the longer they're going to be stored. So
exactly,
it depends on your body fat as well.
Yeah, my body fat is much reduced now. It really is, because just to tell my story again, back on March 1st of 2022, when I had the disastrous physical health check, if you like, the bloods and the weight, I actually weighed in at 133 kilograms. I've got a note here. 133 kilograms, or 293 pounds, which in English measurement is 21 stone. So I was really seriously ill. There was no question about it. And not only that, but I had an HbA1c in English terms of 50, which translates to a percentage of 6.7%, which put me into the type 2 diabetes range. Yeah. So, and then my triglycerides were 4.3, or 380 milligrams per deciliter. So I was basically a heart attack waiting to happen. And it was my great friend, Tommy, had just dropped dead in January at the age of 59, because he too had put on a lot of weight and was metabolically very unhealthy. So I had a very strong why. So the contrast between the doctor and the nurse was incredible, because the doctor basically, I could tell she was treating me with contempt. I could see she was blaming me for the state that I got myself into. And she just wrote the 2 prescriptions, statins and metformin, pretty standard, and dismissed me from her office. At which point, an excellent nurse called Kathy ambushed me and said, "Come into my office." So she said, sat me down, and she said, "Right, what do you eat?" So I said, "Well, I eat healthy. I don't eat sugars. I eat pasta, potato, vegetables, all and meat as well." And she said 4 words to me. She said, "All carbs are sugar." And that changed my life, basically. She told me to cut the carbs, and my last words to her, actually spoke to her, were, "We can do this." So I went away, did the research, threw away the prescriptions for the metformin and the statins, discovered Professor Roy Taylor, and then low carb keto. And hey presto, here I am now, 2.5 years on, much healthier. We'll talk about the way I learned how I was much healthier in a minute. It's quite an amusing story, actually. But one good thing, one happy ending to this story, is that Kathy moved on from the surgery where I was, and she went about 12 miles away. I've now changed surgery as well, but I was able to track her down via her new surgery, and I sent an email to that surgery thanking her and telling her of my success story. And the practice manager immediately got back to me and said, "Thank you so much for this wonderful feedback. It's nice to hear a success story." And she passed it on to Kathy. So Kathy now knows that she basically saved my life. So it's a happy ending of that story. But it's been 2.5 years.
Short talk like that can make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been, it's just so refreshing to see the nurses out there seem to be on board with low carb, as we will discover in a minute. However, the doctors don't seem to be on board, possibly because they are contractually obliged to try and sell drugs, or pharmaceuticals. And basically stories like mine do not make money for the pharmaceutical companies, and therefore by extension the doctors. So I've had three tests since that original disastrous one. I was already out of diabetes by the time I did my first test after going low carb in August of 2022. However, this year's story has been one of quite surprising. I think probably when we spoke in February, I was pretty hacked off with the NHS because I'd had a bad experience at the surgery that I was at when they were rude and denied me my blood test results. Yeah. The only thing they picked up on was the fact that my cholesterol was 7.1 in the British terms, which is about 283, I think, in the other measurement. And of course, all they wanted to do was sell me a statin, and they just sent me a text message. They didn't call me in to speak to me. A doctor I'd never heard of or met told me he wanted to sell me a statin. I just ignored the text message. But in about April, May of this year, Lainey was at her surgery because we were at a different surgery. And she noticed that there was a notice on the wall saying that they are specialising in veterans, armed forces veterans health. So we applied for me to transfer to that surgery, and it actually worked really well. And about the end of May, I was accepted into the surgery, which is called East Key Medical Centre here in Bridgewater. I'm prepared to name that one because they're very, very good. Mm. Coincidentally, at the beginning of June, I went to an Armed Forces Veterans Day in Bridgewater here in Somerset. And I was approached by a nurse in nurse's uniform called Terry. And she asked, "Are you registered with a GP?" Because apparently a lot of guys who leave the forces don't actually register with surgery. So they're not part of the NHS system. So I said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I've just transferred to East Key Medical Centre." And she said, "Oh, that's really good news," she said, "because as of Monday," this was Saturday, she said, "I'm going to go and give them 3 days training in veterans health." So Terry is the Armed Forces project manager for here in the county of Somerset. And Terry and I got into a really, really good conversation. And because I carry around my before and after photos, I was able to show her what I was like before my diagnosis in March 22. And she just could not believe the difference. And she was very open to the fact that I did it via carnivore, which is very refreshing. And she said, "That's an amazing story, George. It really, really is." So Terry comes up again in the story a bit later on, quite a mischievous way, in fact. So my first annual checkup with Eastgate Medical Centre occurred on September the 26th. So I walked down there, as I did, because it was about a mile from my workplace. I walked fairly quickly, so I was a bit of a sweating mess by the time I got there because I'd only just started walking again. It was great to walk down there. So I got into the healthcare assistant's office because she was one who would do the bloods and take the measurements. Lovely young lady called Vicky, and we had a good discussion. She was very impressed with she obviously had the previous figures. She was very impressed with the turnaround and asked me how I did it. And I said, basically, I've been carnivore. I eat only meat. I was expecting massive pushback because, as you know, nurses, we're supposed to eat vegetables, aren't we? She said, "Oh, that's interesting." She said, "My son's a type 1 diabetic. I'm very low carb." So straight away, instead of walking into hostility, I actually walked into a low carb friendly environment, which was very, very refreshing. Yeah. So anyway, after a few days, that was September the 26th, October the 9th, I had to go back and get the results. And I walked in with Nurse Abby, very nice young lady. And she said that she just sat me down and she just said, "This is amazing." She said, "This is the most spectacularly successful story that I have ever seen in reversing type 2 diabetes." She said, "You have now had 3 successful diabetes HbA1c tests in a row. And that means that we no longer consider you diabetic. Back in the old days, diabetes was chronic and progressive. It could only be managed. Then it was discovered you could put it into remission, but you could only be in remission. You couldn't be cured. But now the NHS has changed its mind. And if you get 3 good HbA1c tests in a row, then you are no longer actually considered diabetic." So that was a fabulous news for me. It really was. And just to give you the figures, I was down from 293 pounds. In fact, I'm down to 188 pounds today. So I'm 105 pounds down. So I'm a member of the 100 pounds down club now, which I'm very proud of, joining people like Kerry and Bill Knott and limitless than the over in Australia. So yeah, and that is 13.5 stone, 13.5 stone in British terms. So I've lost 7.5 stone, which is incredible, and I've lost 8 inches off my waist. My HbA1c on the 26th of September was 32 in British terms, which is 5.1 in the percentage. Now I've checked on online, and basically the HbA1c charts, I think they start at 31. So, or 5%. So I'm just 1 point above the lowest possible reading that you can get for a recognised reading you can get for the HbA1c. So that's incredible. And the other massive story is triglycerides, because back in March of 22, my triglycerides were 4.3 in UK terms, or 380, and this time they were 1, and that is basically just again about the lowest you can actually go for triglycerides. Now, possibly one of the most interesting stories of this is that, as you recall, back in January, my cholesterol was 7.1, and I've gone much heavier carnivore, so much heavier fat since then. So I was expecting the lecture from Nurse Abby about my cholesterol, which I expected to go up to 8 or 9 or something. But my total serum cholesterol has actually gone down to 5.5. Now, I couldn't work this one out. I went away and thought about it, and I think that when your cholesterol goes up when you are eating meat and heavily fat, it's because your body is repairing itself. Yeah. I think I've healed to the point now where my mitochondria don't need as much don't need as much deliveries of the fuel provided by ketones and fat that they did when I was healing. Therefore, the liver is no longer producing the total serum cholesterol that it was, because it's thinking, oh yeah, well, he's healed himself. We can concentrate on something else now. So yeah, that was.
Exactly right. I mean, your cholesterol is always exactly what your body needs it to be at that given moment when you get tested, right? And it's usually what happens when people first transition onto the carnivore diet. They do get a cholesterol spike because during that period, their body is healing.
Exactly, that's my theory.
You have to give your body time to heal before you start worrying about bloods and things like that. But eventually, it does settle down because your hormones equalize and everything just calms down, and then obviously you don't need as much like hormones going to different parts of the body. So yeah, it makes perfect
precisely.
sense.
Yeah, there are a couple of funny stories attached to these two appointments. The first one with Vicky, she had to not only weigh me and take blood pressure. Blood pressure was quite high when I got there, so I just walked a mile, but it immediately started dropping on the second. So she said, "Oh, don't worry about that." But she had to test my toes, my feet, for neuropathy, peripheral neuropathy, because obviously, as we know, when you're considered diabetic, then neuropathy is likely to set in, and you are likely to lose your extremities. So she got my foot, and she got some like a little tickling rod or something, and she just lightly touched the ball of my foot, and my reflexes went. She actually had to duck, get out of the way, because my reflex was so ticklish. So she said, "You haven't got peripheral neuropathy, have you?" So I said, "No." She said, "You've got very ticklish feet." I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, that's a really good sign that you haven't got peripheral neuropathy." So that was a good thing. And then the next thing she had to do was take the pulse from my foot, from the around just beneath the ankle bone, I think it was. And she had to use a digital stethoscope. So she put the two earpieces in her ears and applied the digital stethoscope. And her eyebrow shot her through the top of her head. And she had to, again, she actually let backwards. She said, "That is the strongest pulse I've heard in not only in a diabetic, but in anybody else's foot." She said, you are not at risk of losing any of your extremities through diabetes. So that was quite a funny story. She was in a state of shock. And the good news about this is because her husband was, sorry, not her husband, her son was type 1 diabetic. I took the opportunity of introducing her on YouTube to Dr. Ken Berry and his take on type 1 diabetes. Yeah. And she was going to go home that night and research Dr. Berry and type 1 diabetes. So hopefully she might have taken it a bit further from there. It's entirely possible. I don't know. And the same thing about
like that, you would think she would.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully. And the same story with Nurse Abby, really, because she was how did you do it? I said, well, I only eat meat. I don't eat any plant food at all. What, no plant food? I said, no, none at all. She said, okay, fair enough. So she went through all the results. And as you know, I continue to drink alcohol. Myself and Lainey both use it as a kind of self-medication because we like to sit together at night, and it just helps the conversation flow and just relaxes us. So I'm drinking far too much as far as the alcohol is concerned. But Nurse Abby didn't even bother asking the how much alcohol do you drink a week, because she looked at my liver test and said perfect liver function test. So she just skips over it. I said, aren't you going to ask me about alcohol? She said, no, you're clearly a non-drinker because your liver function test is perfect. So I said, Abby, I drink quite a lot. Really? She thought I was taking the piss, basically, because she'd never seen anybody with a perfect liver function test who confessed to being a virtual alcoholic. So, yeah, that was incredible. I'm not condoning going and drinking alcohol because obviously for optimal health, it's probably best not to, but it's been part of my life.
It's quite surprising, though, that your liver is so good, though. I mean, any extra carbohydrates, the liver starts producing more fat. You get the non-alcoholic fatty liver.
Yeah, it's true. But the thing is, the thing is, I'm very conscious of what I drink in terms of carbohydrates. I don't, for example, drink any dark wine or spirits. I certainly don't add any mixers like fruit juice or Coca-Cola. What specifically myself and Lainey drink is a very dry white Italian wine called Soave, which has, I think, maybe 17 grams of carbs per bottle. But I have a theory. that alcohol has been tried, convicted, and jailed for the crimes of fructose, because I believe that it's fructose that causes fatty liver disease.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, fructose directly, affects the liver the most. And the fact that it's put in everything that's processed. And like you said, like a lot of it's mixes too, when people drink alcohol, when they mix it with Coca-Cola and things like that.
Exactly right, yeah. And the other thing, we have a culture in this country, because we have a lot of pubs in town, and we also have a lot of takeaway like kebab shops, fish and chip shops. And traditionally, at the end of a night on the beer, you'll go and get a burger. You get what they call the beer munchies. You'll go and get a burger or a kebab or a pizza or a curry with rice. So people are blaming the beer for actually what they're eating with the beer. There is this term of beer belly, but I occasionally have lager, a low carb lager when I'm out, which is a blonde beer. But I haven't got a beer belly anymore. My stomach is completely flat now, and I've lost, well, apart from slightly saggy skin, where I've lost so much fat. But like I said, I've lost 8 inches off my waist. I'm still wearing the same belt as I was when I was 44-inch waist, but my horse racing friend has had to use the leather punch to punch 5 new holes in it. And I'm actually on the last one now, so I might have to go and visit him again and get another one punching my belt. It's a very good belt, and I'm actually quite proud of it. So it's another way that I demonstrate to people the weight loss and the fat loss.
Yeah.
So beer belly, I don't think is a correct term. I think it should be blamed on carbohydrates, starch, and
sugar
starch
belly, really.
Again, I'm probably going to get some pushback from some of your viewers by confessing to being a virtual alcoholic, but this is my own N=1, so I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying the facts as they are.
Yeah.
So that was quite interesting. So anyway, we'll move on to what Nurse Abby said. So Nurse Abby was interested. She said, "Oh God, I wish I could get you to tell your story to some of my other failing diabetes patients." I said, "Abby, if you let me tell your story to them, you get struck off because it goes against everything that you've ever been taught." She said, "Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I can't do that." So, but she was interested. Now, I prepared a document which I took to listing or a page, an A4 paper document. So I had about 26 lines that I could fill, and I had no problem in filling those lines with health professionals from our world, starting with obviously Dr. Berry, Professor Bart Kay, Professor Tim Noakes, Dr. Baker, Dr. Chafee, Dr. Kiltz, Dr. Hampton, Dr. Lisa Wiedemann. So I produced this list for her. I said, go and research these people on YouTube if you are interested in how I cured diabetes. And I also listed the dangers of seed oils and listed the value of cholesterol in vitamin D and myelin sheath and these sort of things. And on the back, I wrote the history of the nutritional train crash, and I split it into the evil and the misguided on one side, which includes obviously people like Sylvester Graham, Ellen Gould, John Harvey Kellogg, and Ansel Keys, and the 3 Harvard shills, who I know we've researched together, which is Hegsted, Stair, and McGandy, I think that their names were. And I gave a mention there as a misguided person to Dennis Burkitt, who is known as the Fibre Man. He was a very well-meaning doctor. He's actually more famous for Burkitt's lymphoma. But he was him that created the fibre myth with purely observational studies over in Africa. So that myth was born of just no science, really. It's all just observational studies and opinion. So absolutely crazy. On the other side of the paper, I put
it fit with the narrative at the time, though, with Kellogg and the rest of it. So, it got promoted a lot. It got pushed a lot,
Exactly right. On the other hand, I put the suppressed, the good and the suppressed, I think it was. And that includes Sir Philip Randall from the Randall cycle fame, which I know Bart Kay is very fond of. Bart actually asked a rhetorical question back along, and that's why isn't Philip Randall better known? And I think I might have the answer to that, because he actually published the Randall cycle in 1963, which, as we know, was when Ansel Keys was on the rampage, and anybody who questioned his theory got suppressed. So I suspect that the Randall cycle got lost in the noise that was being created by Time magazine and all those publications at the time of Ansel Keys' rise to fame. The same can be said for Professor John Yudkin. They actually were in direct competition. I listed him as the suppressed because, as we know, he wrote, I think in 1971, a book called Pure, White and Deadly, in which he highlighted the dangers of eating sugar versus saturated fat. Keys went on a massive character assassination of that poor man. And he was called to I think it was the McGovern Commission in 1977. And he was totally dismissed, totally put down, and he was disillusioned and disappeared into the background. But he is definitely one of the heroes of our space. Another one which I mentioned is Dr. Christine Kearns. Again, we've researched Christine Kearns together because it was her that did the research about the Sugar Research Foundation. I've also flagged up on that same page Healing Humanity and Kerry Mann because I think he belongs there. And I've also, when it comes to seed oils, I flag up Nina Teicholz as well. So, I gave that document to Abby, and she took it away and she said she was going to have a look at it and study it. So who knows? Who knows where that may lead? But there was we're making progress out of the DC. And one of the cheekiest bits of progress is, as you know, I'm a veteran. So there is a Veterans Health Partnership here headed up by Nurse Terry. Unbelievably, I got an invitation to a professional conference for medical professionals, which was doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals, mental health professionals, and I got invited on the 23rd of October. Now, I had assumed that just all veterans would get invited, but it turns out I was the only non-professional veteran to get invited. And I went up to Terry that day and I said, Terry, why am I here? She said, George, you've got the most fantastic success story this county has ever seen. She said, I just felt it might be an opportunity for you to go and talk to some people. So I wasn't invited to actually speak on the stage, but I got a lot of face time with a lot of doctors. And I was able to tell my story. They didn't really want to hear it. In fact, I showed one doctor the before photographs, and he said, it's amazing. He said, you must be on Ozempic. I said, no, I'm on carnivore. What? I said, I only eat meat. I don't eat any vegetables. He didn't know what to make of it because basically and I gave him a copy of that same document. He said, I'll have a look. He said, I'll go away and have a look at it. He said, but I won't be able to do anything with this. Otherwise I'll be struck off. I said, yes, you are contractually obliged to perpetrate the lie. He said, he just shrugged his shoulders and he didn't really have an answer to that. So so that was interesting. It was very, very cheeky move by Terry to invite me there because she knew by the conversation I'd had with her that I would actually go and speak to people, would not be afraid to do so. So yeah, it's we're making progress out there, DC. We really are. There's no question.
So I've got a problem with these doctors though, that they know that, like you said, some doctors don't want to hear about it. They don't want to know about it. But there are some that they know that this works. They know that, but like you said, they would get struck off. They would lose their job, or they would just, they would have a fair bit of pushback if they started prescribing the carnivore diet, for example. But it only takes a few brave people to stand up and say, look, they're still dealing with other people's health, yet they know it's wrong, but they're still prescribing these drugs. So
exactly.
I have a real problem with that, because they know that this Ozempic and other things that they prescribe are not healthy. They do cause other problems. They have a lot of side effects, but they still do it.
Yeah, precisely.
That to me is like the most cowardly thing you can do. It's the same as these people that just tell you we were just doing our job. That is the most gutless excuse I've ever heard.
Exactly right. It's going to take time to change it. But the fact of the matter is that the nurses appeared to, like Nurse Kathy, who originally saved my life, then healthcare assistant Vicky, Nurse Abby, and especially the senior project manager, Nurse Terry, they seem to be on board, and they seem to want to help us. But again, they are kind of contractually obliged not to. But Terry found a very clever way of giving me some exposure to some medical professionals out there. And it was, it really was a great conference. And the funny thing, as another funny story here, because they asked me, they were providing lunch. So on the application form to attend the conference, they asked, do you have any dietary requirements? I thought, well, I daren't put carnivore, so I put low carb. And I expected nothing. I didn't really expect even an attempt. So at lunchtime, I went out and had a look at the buffet table that was there, which was your pizza, pasta, sandwiches, pies, all your carbs, basically. So I sort of laughed and went outside and had a chat with actually a former veteran friend of mine from many, many years ago, who's now in veterans mental health. I came back in and Terry said, George, she said, there's a plate over there for you on the other table. I said, is there? Okay. So I went over, had a look at it, and they made a pretty good attempt at low carb, to be honest. They'd actually provided me with two pieces of ham, 2 large pieces of cheddar cheese, and a hard-boiled egg split in half with a big pile of salad, which, as we know, is low carb. So I didn't want to be rude, so I ate all the dairy produce and the egg and the ham, but I did send the salad back. But it was good that somebody actually had thought about it and made the attempt. Somebody had actually taken my comment of low carb seriously, and it was nice of Terry to make sure that I actually knew about it. So yeah, it was a very, very rewarding day that day. There's no questions about it. I think we're making progress.
Like, a lot of people do when you tell them that you're low carb, or even if you tell them you're carnivore, they think that just any meat will do. They just, I think a lot of people get confused about that too. So we're not talking about eating like sausages and sandwich ham and Devon and all this sort of other processed meats and stuff. But
exactly.
At least they made an attempt, I guess. So,
yeah, precisely.
Right. It's just a common thing. It's a common thing that people trip up on. Yeah,
exactly. But I really believe that we made huge progress in 2024. In terms of bringing the carnivore community together, because as I told on my own channel, which I've just started, I didn't make my first friend in the carnivore community, international carnivore community, until August 2023, which was our great friend Larry over in Texas, the carnivore soldier. Then shortly after that, I came across Lauren Tucker, who lives not far from me here in Somerset, and as you know, she's very much part of the Healing Humanity story at the moment. She was one of the speakers at the recent conference, which Kerry Mann and Adam Lacey came over for, bringing Dr. Kiltz with them as well, actually, which was a very great thing. So I think that conference probably put us UK carnivores on the map by the end of 2024. But now my friends in the carnivore world are just too numerous to mention. I'm on the UK YouTubers WhatsApp group, and that includes Lauren includes Alex Cannon, the carnivore for life, the guy who everybody gets his age wrong. He was 65 when Dr. Berry estimated him at 35. Who else have we got on there? The other famous one, Lee Copus, of course. I'm sure you know him. He's the guy who lost his colon to fibre. And we've got a couple of other smaller tubers on there, like Sarah at Healthy Carnivore UK, Carl, the Primal Lifestyle, I think you know quite well, myself now included. And recently we've had shall we say, a very high-profile person join our WhatsApp group in Kerry, which is very, very nice. So, you know, he really has recognised his UK carnivore community, and also Larry's on there as well. So, yeah. It's absolutely wonderful. The way we're coming together and the way that we're just appearing all over the place, the number of channels that are appearing, you know, it was Sarah Healthy Carnivore UK and also our friend Dawn, Wrestling Witchface, who basically nagged me into actually having a go at my own channel, which I know you visited. It's very, very unprofessional as yet, but I'm hoping to actually sort of learn a bit and become a bit more professional. But when you think about just the sheer number of people, I knew nobody in the carnival world in the middle of August 2023.
Yeah.
Now I've made friends with you, with all the people I just listed. Dave Mack, obviously. I've got direct. Well, everybody's got direct contact with Dave because he wants to get to know everybody around the world, really, doesn't he? So, yeah, it's been a fantastic journey, which has come nowhere near to an end yet. And we've just got to keep getting the message out there. And the more that, exactly. This is not, what was it Winston Churchill said? This is not the end, nor is it the beginning of the end, but it may just be the end of the beginning. So maybe we have reached the end of the beginning, and that the next stage will be 2025, when I think your very optimistic compatriot, carnivore pensioner, he said he reckons that 2025 will be the year that carnivore really takes off.
Yeah, I think so.
I want to believe. I really do want to believe. In fact, this morning I just found another Dawn Wrestling Witchface actually put me onto another channel which has just started, which was filmed in the Australian outback. I think it's called Meat Base 365. There's another Aussie. He's very philosophical, and he also, I think he follows Taoism, but he knows his mitochondria inside out. He's much better educated than I am on it, but more in line with you. So yeah, I literally subscribed to him today. So quite impressed with him. So that's it. Yeah, Meat Base 365. You want to have a look. I don't know whether he's up your way, but where he was filming, it sounded like the same. The background was very similar to when you go for a walk, and also the bird noise in the background was very similar to when you go for a walk as well. Can't tell you where he's from other than being down under. But yeah, it's interesting. But no, I really feel that 2025 will be the year when we become more optimistic, and when we really, and especially with the start with the launch of two things. Firstly, the American Diabetes Society with Dr. Ken Berry et al., Dr. Hampton, etc. Secondly, of course, Healing Humanity. I'm actually, can I just demonstrate the fact I'm wearing my Healing Humanity sweatshirt today, because I try and advertise it wherever I go. A quick word on why I don't normally join people's channels, although I have joined your Patreon because you've been so helpful to us. And that's that back in the beginning of when I started Carnivore, Lainey was terrified that I was joining a cult that basically would cost us a lot of money, that I would be obliged to send money here, there, and everywhere. So I made a humble promise to her then that I would not send any money as a donation to anything. I'll join your Patreon channel because you've been so good to us, but that's relatively expensive every month. But what I don't do is I can't donate directly to. So how I get around that is by buying merchandise, because obviously any spare expense that goes on the merchandise actually goes into the projects and the channels themselves. So yeah, I apologise to all my friends out there who wonder why I don't, Dave Mack, Sarah, why I don't join your channels, but it's because I made a solemn promise that I would not directly spend money.
That's fair enough.
So there we go. And that's one thing.
Yeah, and it does sound a bit that way at first, doesn't it? Yeah,
it does. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds a bit strange. But we've all been brought up to believe that you got to get your fruit and vegetables to have a proper balanced diet.
Yeah, exactly. Proper balanced diet is fat and protein, adding carbohydrates, and you get a conflicting diet as per the Randall cycle. So,
Exactly.
and it was that conflicting diet that left me in the metabolic mess that I was. Now I'm eating the proper human diet, which is heavy fat, especially the lamb. I know you're a great fan of lamb, and
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, exactly. And I think the lamb fat is probably better in higher in omega-3. The Americans don't seem to be so fond of the sheep. I don't know why, but they're not as big on the lamb as we are. Oh, the other thing about raw as well is that I've noticed when you interviewed Dr. Kiltz, he hinted that raw might have more nutrient value than cooked.
Yeah,
And
I mean, there are two thoughts on that. I mean, I tend, I mean, there may be. I don't think it'd be a big difference. He does like it raw himself. He does eat mostly raw.
yeah, exactly. And also when he spoke at the carnivore conference here in London, he also again hinted the fact that he considered it to be a superior form of nutrition. So yeah, it's nice to have a bit of backup from Dr. Kills. I know that Bart is not so keen on the idea.
I mean, he thinks there's absolutely no difference between. I mean, honestly, we've been cooking meat since the day, from the time we started using fire, like in the caves. So I think it's something we're more adapted to anyway. I mean, I feel good on cooked meat, but I mean, each to their own. If you can,
I can't. I won't deny the fact that I feel very good on cooked meat as well when I was eating mostly cooked, but I just feel slightly better on raw. It's only a 5% difference, but that 5% has brought my knees back. So that's a huge difference for me. Again, I'm not advocating for going eating raw because it does have certain risks to it, especially if you buy meat that has been sat on the butcher's slab and exposed to pathogens. I'm afraid I buy the shrink wrap stuff.
Yeah, I think
I know that has been exposed.
Something people need to be aware of. There are certain things that you need to be aware of. Where you source everyone should be wary of where they source their food from anyway. It doesn't matter whether you cook it or not. For example, I don't eat monogastric animals because what they eat comes out in their products and their flesh and things like that. So you need to know where they're coming from and how they're processed. If you do eat a raw diet, I mean, meat should be as fresh as possible, and the less handling as possible. Raw meat is very popular in Japan. When I lived there, we ate raw meat all the time. Sushi, for example, and sashimi fish. But they also have raw horse meat and raw beef as well. So,
as we know, it was horse meat back in the Siege of Alexandria in 1802, where the Surgeon General of Napoleon's army, he actually used it to cure scurvy. So that's why it became popular in France. But I'll just pick up on the monogastric thing. There is no way that I would consider eating pork or chicken or any of the other monogastrics raw. I really would only consider eating the ruminants, in which case, like I explained, it's lamb and beef for me every time. So myself and Lane.
You can actually get very fresh raw chicken meat in Japan, but it has to be like extremely fresh stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's something you should be wary of. People, I never recommend eating like pork or chicken raw because of salmonella. That's a very real sort of thing. And again, what they eat as well. So
the other good thing for me is that Laney's taken on board the difference between ruminant meat and monogastric meat. So when we have our roast now, it tends to be either lamb or beef rather than pork. We still occasionally eat pork, but there's a change up, but very rarely nowadays. We still like the crackling, for example, on it. But mostly our go-to meat now is lamb or beef or veal. We have a product called rose veal here in the UK. It's not like the cruel way that they produce veal on the continent. It's the dairy bulls who would be surplus to requirements, who would normally be shot at birth. They get 6 months of good pasture life, and they produce an excellent fatty product, which is very tender at the end of it. So I say these bulls, people when they hear the word veal, they get very excited, but it's not the white veal where they're not allowed to move. They go out and live a natural life for 6 months, and they produce an excellent pink rose veal. So yeah, that's another one which we eat a lot of. So there we go.
I mean, a lot of people get upset about that sort of stuff, but I mean, the ruminant animals, I mean, they provide our environment for us, our topsoil and everything like that. But at the end of the day, they're also our food. So
how many millions of bison?
Farming is very, very humane.
Yeah, exactly. But when it comes to this nonsense about cattle farming being bad for the environment, how many millions of buffalo were there on the plains of America when the plains were at their healthiest in terms of
like 60 million
vegetation? Exactly, which is more than the population of cattle in America now. So there's no argument. And look what's happened to Kansas. Basically, it's turned into a dust bowl because of monocropping in agriculture. So there is no basis to the argument.
No, that's right. Again, there's just ignorance and no science behind it.
Very true.
Actually, recently they've started reintroducing buffalo into Europe, and because some study was done, and they were, I don't know why they were surprised, but they were trying to figure out just how much damage cattle do to the environment. But what they actually found was it was actually restoring the environment, restoring the grasslands and the tree growth and everything like that, because they do a lot of clearing as well, So
yeah, exactly. I think there's a term for it, which is I think the term is regenerative grazing or regenerative farming.
Regenerative farming.
Yeah. So it's brilliant.
But that's what happened to. I mean, monocrops have destroyed continents around the world. In fact, I just saw a snippet of a documentary, and they're talking about the transition between hunter-gatherer to the agricultural revolution, and what it actually did to the civilization that actually was part of that. And it took some years, obviously, but obviously it stunted our growth, it reduced our bone structure, everything like that, health-wise. But it actually destroyed a lot of these ruins that you see, like around the world. That the civilization died out because they went to farming, they went to crops rather than hunter-gatherer. So
I noticed a post of a picture you put up just before I came on, actually, of the pre-agricultural skeleton versus the agricultural skeleton. So it's a known fact. What is it? Stabilized isotope testing or something? They call it stabilized isotope. It's very interesting. Anyway, mate, the reason I bring this up is, as you know, I do want to discuss the cancer issue because obviously I've had great success with type 2 diabetes. Unfortunately, my wife Lainey, who you know about, she's a cancer sufferer. She has been since September 2022. So I think I need to update her story, which I wish could be the carnivore conquers cancer story, but unfortunately it's not. So what it is she was suffering from breast cancer, and I think that it's Paget's disease complicates breast cancer a bit, a better way of saying.
Yeah. Because
we went through the standard procedure of poison cut burn. So it's chemotherapy followed by the removal of the mastectomy of the breast, and then the burn is the radiotherapy afterwards. And she was declared in remission successfully. However, in the small print, there's something which we picked up on. We couldn't understand why she was then registered disabled, unable to go back to work, and was having to have massive long-term oral chemotherapy, plus something called the bone infusion, which is an intravenous bisphosphonate or bisphosphonates, I don't even know how to pronounce it, every 3 months.
Yeah.
Because it turns out that Paget's disease can be identified in the biopsy of the tissue that was removed. And I know you know about this because I know you kindly sent me some research. It can lead to bone cancer, Paget's bone disease. So the idea behind the long-term chemo and estrogen suppressants and various other pills and the bone infusion is to actually try and keep the bone cancer at bay. Now, one thing, the problem that we had is that even though we were informed this in a letter, no oncologist ever sat us down and told us the implications of what was going on with Paget's disease. That conversation was never had, which is very disappointing. But one thing we've discovered recently is that basically, in very rare cases, the bone infusion, the IV bisphosphonate, can cause osteonecrosis of the jaw. And unfortunately, as Lainey says, it could only happen to her. She is now going through osteonecrosis of the jaw. I'm sure most of your listeners will know that osteo refers to of the bone, and necrosis means to the dying of. So basically, her jawbone is dying. Her gums are receded to the point where the jaw is showing through. It's getting no blood and is consequently dying, and she's steadily losing her teeth. So it's it's not a happy story, but she's incredibly upbeat, incredibly brave. It is a story of courage and hope, and we are basically fighting our way through it. Obviously, as she's losing her teeth, she lost most of her back molars now, which means that she can no longer chew the meat that we were relying on to try and keep the cancer at bay. So she's back to eating, unfortunately, some of the softer carbs like custard, and the really sort of the yogurt as well. She's big on the yogurt. But as I was explaining to you off air, we're now experimenting with bone broth, high-fat bone broth, because Christmas gave us the idea. We use the turkey carcass and the turkey giblets, and the giblets being the innards, if you like. And we also added the rib of beef that we ate. So basically, any bones we get nowadays are going to go into bone broth, because when she produced it, I think it was yesterday evening, all the fat came to the top. So it was a really good, thick, liquidy broth with a great big thick layer of fat on top. So we're going to experiment with that with her, because we both recognise that fat is the thing that protects you against the mitochondrial disease, that sort of thing. So that is our latest experiment.
You also, your bones are also made up of collagen. You get the bone marrow from the bones. It's going to be very high in collagen as well. It's the best source as well. So
yeah, exactly. So I think as we move into 2025, any bone that we generate through cooking will probably go into bone broth now, and then that gives her a good liquid source of really good fat. So that's
some big
so that's that's the Laney update. But we might have 40 years left. But we can, it's made us realise, as you have realised, the value of life and how precious it is. So we are determined to enjoy what remains of our lives, hopefully 40 years or even more. You never know. We're both 60 next year.
When you have these diseases, you pretty much, that's the way you live. You live basically from test to test, and in between, you just have to, you either, stay at home and stress out about it, or you get on with your life and try and live it as best you can.
Exactly.
That's all we can do,
that's the reason why we drink the wine, because I know that most of my workmates, when they go home, they crash out on the sofa in front of the TV and don't speak to their wives at night. Whereas myself and Lane like to actually sit at the kitchen table and talk, and the wine just helps that atmosphere, ambience, and keeps the conversation flowing, because we hardly watch TV together at all, because when you're watching TV together, you're not interacting. So
you're not engaging with each other.
Exactly right. So that's what I mean by we're making the most of the time we have left, and that means that we get to sit and talk rather than sit and look at the goggle box all the time. So it's
that's good. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's a horrible disease. It really is, and you feel like your body sort of fighting you on every turn. And I was the same. When I was going through, especially when I was going through treatments, if there was like a 0.5% chance of catching or of a side effect, I ended up getting it. It was like, my wife was like, every time it happened, it was like, why is it just you? Like, every time there's this chance of a side effect, you always get it. Like, I ended up winding up back in the hospital. I had like some days I had like 3 hospital trips in one day. You know, like I'd go to in an ambulance ride, and then they'd bring me home, and then again and again and again. It was just crazy. But it's just, I mean, like I said, there's really not much you can do about it except just, you know, do your best and just enjoy the time that you have. And you know, there are always complications. There are always going to be complications when it comes to chemotherapy. I've spoken about chemotherapy before because it really does destroy your immune system. And when that happens, you let in other diseases come in. They're like predator diseases. They sort of start feeding off you because you've got nothing to fight it, you know.
Exactly.
And even with the cancer itself, it just it doesn't really kill the cancer stem cells. It just sort of chops them off at ground level, so the roots are still there.
Exactly. I mean, one knock-on effect of the osteonecrosis is that Lainey has a massive infection in her jaw, and she has to go on a heavy dose of antibiotics for 3 months, which is unusual. Wow. But she can't stop taking the chemo, and the knock-on effect of that is now nausea and vomiting. Most days she will have 1 round of nausea and vomiting. So the consequences. I think whether you said once, if the cancer doesn't get you, the treatment will. And and I think I told her the story of my elderly friend Joan, who died in January. It was January, in fact, when she was being treated for a similar cancer to Lainey, and she had the intravenous bone infusion as well, which weakened her legs to the point where she fell down the stairs, broke her pelvis, and then basically gave up on life and died. So again, it was not the cancer that actually killed her; it was the treatment.
And that happens more often than not, unfortunately. It weakens you to the point where other things come in and they can sort of feed on you, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Your autoimmune system is knackered, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's why I think this is why carnivore especially is such a good diet, because it really helps you. A high fat diet helps you to feed your immune system, your lymphatics, to get everything around.
Exactly.
And try and restore your immune system, and try and rebuild everything after treatment, because you need to rebuild as fast as possible, you know. But anyway,
but she's still very active. She still does all the housework, puts all the rubbish out and everything, because she obviously can't go and.
That's important to be active still, because I think that the next most important thing to diet is circulation. Because you have to circulate the blood, you have to circulate the lymphatics, the lymph fluid, to get all those nutrients around your body to fight these diseases. You know, it is by far my number one hack to next to diet. Yeah,
absolutely. And she's very keen to continue doing the housework, because it's just keeps her busy and keeps her active. And hoovering up, vacuum cleaning up and down the stairs, mopping the floors, doing the washing up, doing the cooking, going out and doing the shopping. It's all activity, so it does help with the circulation. Yeah.
That's good. That's fantastic. That's good.
Well, she is a warrior. She's not going to give up. There's no question about that.
That sounds good.
She has the occasional sort of feeble days, especially with the osteoporosis. But most of the time she's strong. Very upbeat.
That's fantastic.
Very active. So there we go.
Excellent. Well, it's good. We all have those days where you sort of can't really do much, but on the days where you do feel good, it's good to be up and doing things.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for the update. I'm really glad that you are doing well.
I'm the happy story.
Yeah, literally curing diabetes, which, like you said, before, and even now, really, like most people still think that diabetes is a degenerative disease that you cannot get rid of. You've got it for life.
Chronic and progressive, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. But I'm a big believer, like Kilt said, it all starts with the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. These sort of, and if you can pretty much fix your liver, and which is very, very resilient. I think you can reverse a lot of chronic disease. So
I think, I think I'm living proof of that, to be honest with you.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, George. Well, thanks again, mate. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Mate, it's great to catch up with you, and thank you so much for the support you've given to me and Lainey. You've been great to us. You really have, with the research and just the support. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Well, give my best to Lainey, and we'll talk again soon, okay?
No worries, mate. See you next time.
All right. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, EC. Bye-bye.